Ben and Grandad's Adventures Around Liverpool by Mary Gonzalez and Sylvia Gonzalez. Paperback illustrated by Jeff Cogan, with thanks to Joan Preston for her help and support. Copyright 2016. Chapter 1. The shadows from the flames on the coal fire danced around Grandad's living room, fighting to stay lit as it battled against the harsh wind that blew down the chimney. 8-year-old Ben slumped up against his granddad's frosted window, looking for any signs of life in the emptiness that surrounded them. The cottage sat wedged high up firm in the rocks in one of many of the hills in a little remote part of Wales, just as Grandad liked it. The loudest thing in the room was a clock towering high in the corner of the room. Time had seemed to slow down in the cottage, and he thought the next 48 hours were never going to pass. Grandad broke the silence, clearing his throat as he pulled himself forward in his special comfy armchair. Ben sat down, waiting to hear what Grandad was going to say. Maybe a joke, or a story, or even better, he was going to tell Ben that he'd finally got around to buying a computer and had got himself connected to the internet. Grandad picked up an iron poker from the side of his armchair and stabbed at the fire just before he fell back into his chair. Ben sighed loudly as he too slumped back in his chair as any hope of anything happening between that moment and his parents coming to pick him up had vanished. Ben noticed the main light bulb as it swung from an old frail cord from the low-beamed ceiling. All the furniture looked like it was the same age as Grandad. Nothing had been replaced with new up-to-date gadgets. Even Grandad's dog Willow was old and boring, curled up in front of the fire, letting life pass him by. Grandad sat looking at Ben, thinking hard for something to say, as he noticed Ben's eyes had stopped at a photograph hung on the wall. "Oh, now that's me and Horace on our last adventure. We go on holiday together, usually in Horace's old car," Grandad told Ben. "His house is the first house you'll come to if you head back towards the town. He's like me, keeps himself to himself, and keeps himself busy planning our mini getaways. He'll research the whole area and plan our days with places to visit. He writes out an itinerary for us to follow, so there's no getting lost. We know exactly where and when we are going. We had a great time on our last trip, and we got to see a bit more than we expected," he said, as he gave Ben a big wink. At this point, Ben had switched off at the thought of two old men driving around in an old run-down Mini, which was probably the same age as Grandad and Horace, visiting old boring places where they probably talked all day about facts and things that had once happened at those places. "I'll take you one day to go and see my friend Horace. You'll get on great with him." The conversation came to a sudden halt as a little window crashed open, blowing everything around into a big mess over the floor as a gust of wind raged around the room. Ben jumped up to close the window as Grandad tried to scoop all his papers up. "No, no, no," he cried as he tried to blow out some of the papers that had got caught up in the fire. "It's my latest itinerary from when we went to Liverpool. I've got great memories. Come sit closer, and I'll go through the itinerary with you, Ben." Ben couldn't think of anything less he wanted to do, but with no excuses and nothing else to do, he sat himself down on the floor between Willow and Grandad as they both looked at page 1. Within minutes, the itinerary was again flying into the air as the three of them jumped with fright at the loud crash as a thunderbolt hit through the house, sending vibrations running through everything. The light bulbs shattered across the floor, sending them into darkness. Willow had finally come to life as he bounced up against the kitchen door, barking loudly, making Grandad and Ben curious as to what was on the other side of the door. A bright light glimpsed through from the gap under the kitchen door. Grandad scooped up his itinerary and clutched it tightly as he stretched out to find Ben. "Watch you don't hurt yourself on the broken glass," Grandad said to Ben as they carefully guided each other towards the kitchen door. Grandad found the door handle to the kitchen as Willow was still barking, trying to scratch his way under the door. Hearts racing, adrenaline pumping, they slowly opened the door and stepped forward onto what Grandad thought was his old cold floor tiles. Chapter 2. Ben, Grandad and Willow all stood in a daze on a railway platform, looking around in bewilderment, trying to figure out their bearings. "What's happening, Grandad? How have we arrived here?" Grandad shrugged cluelessly. "I don't know, Ben. All I do know is that 1 minute we were walking through the kitchen door of my cosy cottage in the Welsh mountains, and now we are standing here on a railway station." "Look, Grandad, it says Liverpool Lime Street Station." Ben pointed nervously to a sign high up on the wall. "I thought it looked familiar. This is where I came with Horace on our last adventure," said Grandad, confused. A train pulled into the station and came to a halt. The train doors opened and the passengers all piled off and made their way towards the turnpike. Willow started barking. He had never been on a railway station before. He barked at the crowds of people who had got off the train, which had arrived from London. Nobody flinched or took any notice of them, even while Willow barked loudly as they passed. "Let's mix in with the crowds and get out of here," said Grandad. They made their way towards the ticket collectors and walked through the turnpike with the crowd. Nobody asked them for a ticket or even glanced at them. It was as if they were invisible. Standing at the side of the coffee bar at the entrance of the station, the strong smell of coffee drifted out and teased Grandad's taste buds. To the left, a man was selling newspapers, and the right, a woman was selling flowers. Lime Street Station was busy with people standing around in groups chatting. As Grandad suggested that they go for a coffee, the itinerary that he had been clutching at blew out of his hand. As it slowly floated down to the ground, Ben and Grandad quickly noticed a strange red glow coming from it. Grandad stooped down and nervously picked the itinerary up by its corner. Chapter 3. Grandad grasped the itinerary in his hand and opened it up. Ben stretched up and peered into it. "Turn the page, Grandad. What does it say?" he whispered. As Grandad turned the page slowly, it revealed some sort of a map. The path lines on the map were flashing on and off. Grandad and Ben shielded their eyes until the flashing gradually died down. "It looks like a map of Liverpool," said Grandad. Desperate for adventure, Ben cheered. "Let's follow it," he said, jumping up and down excitedly. Grandad wanted the opposite of adventure. He just wanted to get home. "Let's go to the end of the map and see if it tells us how to find my kitchen door. We will need to find that in order to get back into my cottage," said Grandad. "Grandad, read what it says at the end of the map," said Ben. "It's a riddle. It says, 'You might need a set of wings to get you around. Go down to Albert, and you will have found a key to set you free, and to get back to where you want to be.'" "Well, I don't know anyone called Albert in Liverpool, so how can I visit Albert?" said Grandad. Ben pointed at the map as the edges of the map started flashing and slowly revealed another message. It said, "Tick-tock, get down to the dock." "Ah, I think it means the Albert Dock at the River Mersey, at the pier head. Let's waste no time, Ben. Follow me. Come along, Willow." With that, they all set off, walking down to the dock. It was evening, and the sun had gone down. The city was bustling with people. Some were waiting outside of cinemas and theatres. The bright lights of the theatres were lighting up the pavement, flashing on and off. "That's the Adelphi Hotel," said Grandad, pointing to a busy hotel where lots of people were coming and going through the hotel doors. "That's where all the actors stay when they come to Liverpool to play in the theatres." As they passed Matthew Street, Grandad pointed again. "That's the cavern where the Beatles played and became famous." They stopped to watch the crowds queuing up outside to go in. They could hear music playing, and they watched a band carrying all their equipment in. They scurried along down to the pierhead, with Willow following them. Arriving at the docks, Grandad needed to sit on a bench to catch his breath. They made their way to the benches overlooking the River Mersey, where there were plenty of people sitting enjoying the gentle breeze from the river. They sat looking at the crowds wandering in and out of the ticket office as they booked their tickets for a ride on the Mersey ferry. They watched the ferry arrive at the landing stage as tourists were taking photographs of surrounding buildings and the Albert Dock. As Grandad's eyes tried to keep up with all the hustle and bustle going on around them, they stopped on a door that was hovering a foot above the ground. "Look!" Grandad pointed to a spot several yards in front of the crowd. "It's my kitchen door!" he cried in astonishment. Willow nervously jumped up as they all raced towards the door. "Stay close, so we all go through together," said Grandad anxiously. However, all three were brought to an abrupt halt. They could not go any further towards the door. It was as if an invisible barrier was stopping them. Chapter 4. They staggered a few steps back and tried again and again to get to the door, but each time they were held back by an invisible force. The itinerary was glowing again, and as Grandad pulled it out of his pocket and held it in front of him, they noticed the invisible force protecting the door was no longer active. They frantically turned the handle in every direction possible, failing every time. "Look, Grandad, there is a dial where we need to enter in a code and 2 big keyholes. You didn't have that on your door at home," said Ben, puzzled. "How are we supposed to guess the code? We could be here all year," cried Grandad. Without warning, a strong wind took over the docks. Everyone ran for shelter whilst the sky was rapidly hidden by the dark clouds above. Once again, the itinerary found itself escaping Grandad's clutch as it swirled out of control up and down the docks, with Willow patiently chasing it. "Catch it, Willow! It's our only hope of getting home," called Grandad as his voice bounced about in the wind. Willow managed to grasp it and return it to Grandad. As quickly as it had started, the wind dropped, but the street stayed empty. It was a mystery where everyone had gone. "Good boy, Willow! You seem to know how important this itinerary is to us," said Grandad, giving Willow a pat on the head as he shook off Willow's saliva. "Is there any new clues on the itinerary, Grandad? It might tell us how to get through the door." Grandad studied the itinerary and said, "The map has become invisible, but it says here, read the history of Albert before you turn the page." "I must read the history of the dock before we continue with the map," said Grandad. "There's a little bit of history here, Ben. I'll read it to you." The Albert Dock was opened by Queen Victoria's husband in 1846. He was Prince Albert, and the dock was called the Albert Dock after him. There was a great ceremony with bands playing and thousands of people came to watch, and the flags were flying on the Liva buildings. It was a great day. The Albert Dock got the first hoist in Europe. The ships came into the docks from all over the world. They brought in tea from India, silks from China, wine from Spain, fruit from foreign countries, and other goods from all different countries. Cotton was brought from the cotton mills, like Trencherfield Mill in Wigan. It was transported from Wigan to Liverpool by barges on the Leeds to Liverpool Canal, then stored in the warehouses on the dock, then hoisted on the ships to be taken to other places and other countries. The Albert Dock was very busy. The hoist was used to lift up all the heavy crates and stack them in the warehouse at the side of the dock. All these buildings at the dockside were warehouses. They were used to stack the goods until the lorries came to take them to the shops to be sold to people. "It must have been very busy in those times," said Ben. "Yes, it was," said Grandad. "We have a museum there in the warehouse now. It says here that the dock was closed in 1972 and opened up again in 1984, just in time for the tall ships to come in." As Grandad finished reading the history on the docks, the itinerary started to glow again, and the map mysteriously appeared. "Look, Grandad! The map just appeared as if it can hear where we are up to. Another riddle!" exclaimed Ben. It says, "I'm yellow on the outside and move with the tide. Climb aboard if you wish. You need to catch a tasty fish." Ben and Grandad looked around them, searching for the answer. "It might mean the Mersey ferry," said Ben. But Grandad could see the ferry crossing the river, and it was not yellow. "No, Ben, but can you see that advert in the ticket office window?" Ben raced up to the window, and there was a poster of the big yellow duck. It read, "You have never toured Liverpool until you have been on the Yellow Duck Marine, Liverpool's most exciting land and water tour." "This is it," said Ben excitedly, jumping up and down. "That's what the riddle means. We have to ride on the Yellow Duck. Grandad, let's find where it is." Willow gave a couple of barks as if approving. They walked around the pierhead, trying to track the Yellow Duck. "It could be anywhere, Ben. It travels on land and water, so make sure you look all around," said Grandad. Grandad hadn't finished his sentence when they spotted a bright yellow boat driving on wheels coming down the road towards them at the dock. Ben watched in amazement and confusion at how a boat was on land. His mind raced with questions, but there was no time for answers just yet. Chapter 5. As the duck got closer, Grandad called out to the driver politely, "Excuse me, can we climb aboard, young man?" "Sorry, mate, I finished for today," said the driver. "I'm off home to fry some fish for supper. I was up early this morning fishing before I started work on this duck. We have come all the way from Wales, and we are meant to take a ride on this duck. Tomorrow will be too late." "Well, okay then, jump in," said the driver. "I'll give you a mini tour. You can't go back to Wales without experiencing the Yellow Duck. I'm called Tom." The duck took them around the city while Tom pointed out places of interest. "Those buildings we are passing now are the Port of Liverpool, the Cunard Building and the Liva Building. They make Liverpool one of the most recognised skylines in the world," he said, pointing to the fine buildings near the waterfront. "The people of Liverpool call them the Three Graces. There are 2 cathedrals, the Cavern, the important big hotels, and the many theatres, and finally St. George's Hall." Tom slowed down so Grandad could take some photos. Tom shouted "Hold on tight" as he sped up to build up speed as they entered the water. The Yellow Duck made a dramatic dive into the river, bounced everybody on board around until it very quickly found its balance and sped through the choppy waters of the Mersey. Chapter 6. The Yellow Duck continued sailing along the river. "That's Salthouse Dock," said Tom, pointing to the docks. "And that's Wapping Dock," he said as they passed another. "There is Queen Dock," he said as the duck went cruising along the river. "These docks were all very busy at one time," said Tom. The air was fresh and salty, and the breeze got stronger as they sailed along. Grandad and Ben used the driver's fishing rods to try and catch some fish on their tour round. The tour finally came to an end, and they were back at the Albert Dock. The Yellow Duck shot up the ramp and out of the river, back on land again. Ben and Grandad had not caught any fish. They had been too busy seeing the sights, the whole purpose of the tour on the Yellow Duck. He still couldn't figure out how a fish was going to get them home. "Thank you, Tom," sighed Grandad and Ben as they disembarked from the Duck Marine. "That's okay, here you are, catch these fish," Tom called out. "I caught plenty this morning. Enjoy them for your supper and have a good journey back to Wales." Tom sped off in the Yellow Duck, leaving Grandad trying to grip the slippery fish with both hands. "Well, Ben, that sorted that riddle out, but what on earth do we do with them now?" "We will find out soon, I'm sure," said Ben. Grandad could hear a faint bark coming from down the road. Ben and Grandad both looked puzzled at each other as they could see Willow limping towards them with a strange man. "Oh dear, what's happened? Something's wrong with Willow. When did he leave us, and where on earth has he been?" Grandad had lots of unanswered questions running through his mind. As they approached, it became clearer that Willow had a bandage around one of his paws. "Excuse me, is this your dog?" questioned the stranger. "Yes, he is," said Grandad. "What has happened to his paw?" "Well, he was chasing seagulls here on the dock, and he cut his paw on a piece of glass. I took him to the vet. He lives nearby, and he said it's nothing to worry about. He gave him an injection and put a bandage on his paw," explained the stranger. "Well, I can't thank you enough for helping Willow. What do I owe you for the vet bill?" asked Grandad. The stranger handed the receipt over to Grandad. "There's a number on the back of the receipt if you need to get in touch with the vet. Keep it safe, you never know when this number might come in handy," said the stranger. "Well, I must be off as I need to get home for my tea. Enjoy the rest of your night." With that, he disappeared down the road in the same direction as he came. Ben and Grandad sat down on a bench, looking into the sky. The sun was sinking fast. The kitchen door appeared flashing and hovering over the ground. They ran towards it, eager to open it. "Come along, Willow, we are going home," yelled Ben as Willow followed. However, just as they got to the door, the invisible force stopped them again. The itinerary started to flash and vibrate. Once the flashing lights stopped and the itinerary stopped vibrating, Grandad opened it up and spread the map out on the ground. "Look, there is another riddle flashing in the map," it says. "You need 2 keys to open me, but you must get as busy as a bee and collect them all for me." "Okay, so we need to get 2 keys to open the door, Ben. We will have to go around the town to look for them. My poor knees are aching so I can't walk any further. We need transport to get us around." "Grandad, I've just remembered, in the first riddle, it said we might need a pair of wings to get us around," said Ben, jumping with excitement. Ben looked at the map again as it lit up. Flashing red lights came out of it. Ben read out, "Read the history of the liver birds." "Go ahead and read," said Grandad. "The Liver Building was built in 1911, and the 2 birds you see sitting on the towers are called cormorants. The sprigs they have in their mouths are like seaweed. There is a legend that one bird looks out to sea, making sure that the seamen come home. The other one looks inland, watching over the city. If they ever fly away, the city of Liverpool will cease to exist." "There is another riddle here, Grandad. It says, 'I can fly. You will find me high up in the sky. Use the fish to pay. Only then will I take you on your way.'" Following the riddle, Ben and Grandad looked high into the sky. Ben pointed at the liver birds. "Grandad, could the riddle mean those birds?" Grandad chuckled as Ben stepped forward and threw one of the fish that the yellow duck driver had shared with them high up into the air and watched it splat back down just as fast. A big, strong gust of wind blew off the river, and Ben quickly threw the fish up again. Grandad pulled Ben back as they both watched in disbelief as one of the liver birds swooped up into the air and snapped up the fish. The liver bird grew larger and larger before swooshing down, landing at the side of them. "It all fits in now. What we have to do is get the keys to get through the door and back into my kitchen. We need to ride on the bird to get the keys," said Grandad. "There's no time to waste, Grandad. We have to go for a ride like it says in the riddle," said Ben. The wind gained strength as the bird crouched down as though to signal them onto his back. Grandad tossed Ben onto the large bird's back. Willow scrambled on after him, and Grandad jumped on just in time as the bird flew up into the sky at great speed. Grandad, Ben, and Willow clung on as best they could as the bird flew in all directions. The huge bird flew higher and higher as Grandad clung onto its neck. Ben clung onto Grandad with one hand and Willow with the other hand. Willow barked and howled with excitement as they all gazed down at the view below them. The view was magnificent from the great height they were flying around the city at. The view was magnificent from the great height they were flying around the city at. The huge clock faces on the Liva building could be seen, along with the River Mersey glittering and shimmering with boats dotted here and there. Chapter 7. The flight around the city only seemed short before the Liva bird swooped back down to the ground. They all clambered off, feeling dizzy and shaky after their flight experience. The Liva bird flapped its wings and flew away, back towards the pier head. "Where are we, Grandad?" asked Ben, looking around him at all the great buildings. "Well, Ben, we have arrived back at St. George's Hall. There must be a reason why we have been dropped off here." "Open the itinerary, Grandad. It might tell us what to do next," said Ben. Grandad spread the itinerary on the floor. Once again it lit up and sparks shot out of it. Grandad, Willow and Ben jumped back to dodge the sparks. "It looks like it could explode just like a firework," said Ben. As the spark stopped, Grandad bent down and cautiously picked it up, unsure if the sparks would restart. He read out to Ben, "Look for Victoria, but first read her history. She will give you a key to solve the mystery." "There's some history written down in large, luminous letters. They are flashing out at me," said Grandad. "Oh, read it out loud, Grandad." "It says here that Queen Victoria, that's the statue you see in front of you. Well, she became Queen of England at the age of 18. That was the year 1837. Grandad looked at the statue of Queen Victoria on horseback and could just imagine the parties that would have been held when Victoria was made queen. He could imagine fine coaches and horses driving down the streets of London packed with people waving flags. She married Prince Albert and had 9 children. Most of her children married heads of European countries. She became Empress of India, and her whole empire included Australia, New Zealand, and parts of Africa. She must have been a very important queen, said Ben. The itinerary started to flash again, making Grandad drop it on the ground. Once the flashing stopped, Ben took it and spread it carefully on the floor and read, "Take 5 steps forward and then go back 15 to activate the Queen." Ben had spotted a key around the statue's neck. "Grandad, there is the key to the kitchen door. It's around Queen Victoria's neck." "How can we possibly get it?" asked Ben. "Well, we can do what it says. Let's take the steps forward and back," said Grandad. "It says something else here now. It says, 'Tell her something that will make her smile, or she and her guards will chase you for many a mile.'" Grandad and Ben continued to take 5 steps forward towards the statue of the Queen, and then 15 steps back. Immediately, another strong wind blew up from nowhere, tossing the itinerary all over the place. To their complete surprise, Queen Victoria and her horse seemed to come to life. The horse reared up, and the Queen called out in a strong voice, "Who goes there?" 2 guards appeared on either side of her. The guards waved their swords at Grandad and Ben and charged towards them. Grandad and Ben ran as fast as their legs could carry them. They ran in fear all around the front of the hall, with the guards chasing them. "Willow is still at the statue of the Queen! Let's run for him!" shouted Grandad. The guards quickly caught up with Grandad and Ben and took a firm grip of them as they marched them back to the statue. Grandad was grateful to see that Willow hadn't moved. However, the Queen looked very stern, and her horse was prancing up and down. "We have caught these 2 vagabonds, Your Majesty. What will we do with them?" said the guards. "You can throw them in the dungeons in St. George's Hall," said the Queen, pointing towards the hall. "They appear to be from the future. What century are you from, young man?" the Queen asked Ben. "The 21st century, Your Majesty," answered Ben. This could work out well for everybody," said the Queen. I will save you both from the dungeons in the hall if you can tell me something about my future. Ben thought quickly about the riddle. He remembered it told him to tell the Queen something good. The guards still had a firm grip of both Ben and Grandad. Ben thought back on what they had read about Queen Victoria. He cleared his throat, and in a strong voice he said, "Your Majesty, you will have 9 children, and they will go on to marry European heads of state, making you a very powerful and influential queen." It was quickly apparent that Ben had said all the right things, as the Queen gave a smile and her angry look vanished quickly. "Very well, I look forward to these future events. I'll stick to my word. You can both go free," said the Queen, removing the key from around her neck as she held it out, offering it to Ben. "Take this key and be on your way," she said. As Ben took the key, the Queen rapidly turned back to stone. The guards vanished, and everything returned to how it was when they first arrived. Chapter 8. Grandad and Ben looked around to see if anybody else had just witnessed the madness going on around them, but the streets were still deserted. "Can all this be just a dream, Grandad?" "I don't know. I just know that we still have to find another key." Grandad carefully placed the key that Queen Victoria had given them safely into his pocket. Noise could be heard coming from the hall. Making their way over to see what was going on, they noticed a poster pinned on the wall. It says here, "Free admittance, lecture on ancient and recent archaeology discoveries by Professor James Isherwood. All are welcome." "Come on, let's go inside. We might find another key," said Grandad. "We can't," said Ben. "You have forgotten something." Grandad, looking puzzled, scratched his head. "The itinerary, it's gone. It must have blown away," said Ben. "Oh dear me, so it has. I'm getting very forgetful, Ben. Let's go and look for it," said Grandad. They both searched around but could not see anything obvious. Further along the road, tucked between the feet of a statue of a lion, sat the itinerary. "Look, Grandad," pointed Ben. "There's the itinerary, and look at that. There's a key around the lion's neck." Grandad blinked and rubbed his eyes. "Sure enough, that's another key, Ben," he said in surprise. "How can we get it down?" asked Ben. No sooner had Ben said those words when the itinerary started to flash. "It's telling us something again. Another riddle, perhaps," said Ben. They waited for the bright, flashing light to die down before Grandad picked it up. As he opened it, he saw a picture of St. George's Hall and the lion. Under it were the words, "Go to George and collect a bone. Only then will the lion leave you alone and give you a key to set you free." "Who is George?" said Ben. "What does it all mean?" "First, I must read you the history of St. George's Hall," explained Grandad. "Then we must go inside to collect a bone. When we have the bone, we toss it to the lion. Then he will give us the key. Ben, listen to me. Where St. George's Hall now stands, there was once a hospital. It was the very first hospital in Liverpool in 1749. After that, the hall was built because there was nowhere for musical festivals or anywhere big enough for important meetings to be held in 1824. In 1838, a stone was laid at the hall to commemorate Queen Victoria's coronation. People say that it is one of the finest Neo-Grecian buildings in the world, Grandad explained. There are law courts there now, and when they are not in use, they are used for TV dramas. As Grandad folded the itinerary up, it started to vibrate in his hands. He continued to read. "You have another quest before you get back to your nest. Your cottage in Wales is waiting for you, your fire is in flames, and the kettle is on the brew. You must get through the kitchen door, as I am helping you. Take 5 steps forward and back 4, for the lion to give a loud roar." "Let's do that," said Ben. "Slow down, Ben. I'm not sure about this. That lion doesn't look very friendly. I wouldn't like it to eat us for supper," said Grandad, scratching his head as he always did when he was thinking hard. "Then again, I suppose we must follow the instructions, Ben. I do want to get back to my fireside and the kettle on the boil. I'm ready for a nice cup of tea. Let's waste no more time. We will take the steps." Ben and Grandad counted the steps forward, then the 4 steps back. Immediately after the last step, the lion came alive with a tremendous roar that echoed eerily around the place. It shook its head and glared angrily in Grandad's direction. Ben and Willow were glued to the spot in fear, but only for a moment, as the lion took a step towards them, and they all ran as fast as their legs could carry them. Chapter 9. There were still no people around to help them, as they ran around in circles being chased by an angry lion. Sweat poured from them as they ran in fear. Grandad could see the entrance to St. John's Gardens and shouted out to Ben, "Run into the gardens, Ben!" Ben fled into the gardens with Grandad and Willow, and they hid behind some bushes whilst they got their breath back. "We will have to get into St. George's Hall to get a bone," whispered Grandad. "As it says in the riddle, throw him a bone and he will leave us alone." The lion had lost track of them as it went in the opposite direction. It sniffed and pawed the ground, trying to get their scent. Grandad clung on to Ben and Willow and fled towards the hall, up the steps and through the door, which he slammed shut after them. The doorman dashed over to them as soon as he saw Willow. "Quiet, please. We need quiet, as the professor is in the middle of his lecture. We don't allow dogs in," he said, giving Willow a stern look. "Please, sir, don't send Willow out, as there's a lion outside waiting to eat him," said Ben. The doorman quietly chuckled to himself. "Well, young man, what an imagination you have. I will make an exception on this occasion and let him stay. But you must make sure he is quiet," he said. He pointed to some empty seats at the back of the room and signalled for Grandad and Ben to sit down. They joined the audience and sat down in the packed room to listen to the lecture. "We should warn everybody that there's a lion outside roaming around," whispered Ben. "Shush, boy, don't be talking about the lion in here. It will send the room into complete panic," whispered Grandad. "What we need is a bone, just like what the professor is holding up right now." Ben had to stand in his seat to get a glimpse of the professor, as the room was packed with people, all sitting listening intently to him giving his lecture. Ben's mouth fell wide open as he saw the professor holding a huge bone to the audience. "This ancient relic was found in Africa 100 years ago," said the professor, holding the bone high up in the air. Everyone clapped their hands in appreciation. However, Willow had had no dinner or supper, and he got one glimpse of the bone and raced down to the stage, where he took grip of the bone and wrestled it from the professor, who stepped back in shock. As quick as Willow had leapt forward and taken the bone, he spun back around and raced towards the exit with Ben and Grandad close behind. "The bone, Grandad, is just what we need," shouted Ben. "Let's get out of here." They all pounced back into the open. "Keep your eyes open for the lion," shouted Grandad. Willow wagged his tail with the bone firmly in his mouth. "We can't waste time, Ben. The people in the hall will be after us soon. We must head back to the docks." It wasn't long before the lion caught up with them. Ben prepared by trying to get the bone out of Willow's mouth, but Willow held on tight, refusing to let go of the bone. "Never mind the bone now. Run, Ben. It's too late to give it to the lion. He's coming after us. Run, run, run!" screamed Grandad. The three raced in the direction of the docks with a hungry lion pouncing after them. Chapter 10. They raced through the streets hoping to find the kitchen door, down alleyways and narrow streets, hoping that the lion would lose them. Fearing that they wouldn't make it, Ben spotted a huge live bird flying overhead. "Grandad, look up!" cried Ben. "There's the live bird!" Grandad looked up and he put his fingers in his mouth and blew as hard as he could, making a loud whistle. The bird swooped down and spread its wings to help Grandad, Ben, and Willow onto its back again. Ben clutched Grandad with one hand and Willow with the other and leaped up onto the bird's back. As the bird soared into the air, it rapidly descended down again, just out of reach of the lion's clutch. The bird couldn't fly much higher because of the weight of the bone still clamped in Willow's jaw. "Try and grab the bone, Ben, and throw it to the lion," shouted Grandad. With one swift movement, Ben snatched the huge bone from Willow's mouth and flung it to the ground, landing with a thud. The lion leapt up into the air, clashing into the bone and landing with a thump. The key had finally come loose and was no longer around the lion's neck. The crash landing had freed the key and was now lying on the floor. The liver bird swooped down and snatched the key up into his claws, then continued until it returned them to the kitchen door. They leapt off the bird's back and grabbed the key out of its claws. The fog was thick around them, making it hard to see around them. They could hear the lion tackling the bone not too far away. "Hold on to each other so that we don't lose each other or fall into the River Mersey," said a worried Grandad. "This fog might get even thicker." They could hear the foghorns blowing across the river, warning ships to take care. Reaching out in front of them, they searched for Grandad's kitchen door. A light was glowing from under it, guiding them to it. The door was hovering a foot from the ground. The two large keyholes were flashing, and they could clearly see the combination lock on top of the keyholes. Grandad wriggled his pockets and took both keys out and started trying the locks in desperation. "Please work, I'm tired and just want to get back home," pleaded Grandad. The keys slotted straight in and easily turned clockwise, unlocking the locks. The flashing keypad was now the only thing stopping them from returning home. "Okay, Ben, we need to try different number combinations. Are there any riddles left on the itinerary?" Ben opened up what was left of the itinerary. It had creased and torn and got wet through their adventure around Liverpool. "It's all ripped. I can't make out what the last riddle says," said a sad Ben, as all hope was quickly vanishing of ever getting home. A familiar voice could be heard from behind the kitchen door. It was loud and clear and echoed around the foggy Albert Dock where they stood. "Listen up! The last riddle is, enter the date you got of your mate to open the door and be here no more." "Horace, is that you?" cried Grandad. "What's going on?" "Hurry!" shouted Horace from behind the door. "You're running out of time. You need to work out the riddle before the fog clears and the lion sees you." "Horace is right, Ben. Come on, what dates does the riddle mean?" Well, there were dates in the itinerary information Ben remembered. Great Ben! What was the date of Queen Victoria's coronation? Ben was good at remembering dates. "The 28th of June, 1838, he said. Grandad quickly pressed the numbers into the lock. "It doesn't work," he said. They were interrupted by all the noise going on next to them. There was a massive battle for the bone between the lion and the liver bird. Feathers were flying, squawking, and fierce growls filled the air. The liver bird was shrinking back to its original size. "Quick, Grandad, think!" cried Ben. "Oh, wait a minute, Ben. What year was the Albert Dock opened?" 1846, shouted Ben as fast as he could. Grandad's fingers trembled whilst he entered the digits. They heard a loud clicking noise as the final lock opened. To their immense relief, it clicked, and the door slowly opened. Willow gave an excited bark and threw himself inside. The lights were blinding bright coming from inside the door. Grandad and Ben took a look around them and could clearly see the liver bird and the lion still battling for the bone as the last of the fog cleared. The liver bird was now back to its original size and fluttered its wings, trying to escape being the lion's dinner. It flew straight past Ben and Grandad, turning the lion's attention back to them. The lion dropped the bone and sprang into their direction. Horace grabbed Ben and Grandad and hauled them back through the kitchen door and kicked the door shut behind them. Chapter 11. Grandad and Ben were sprawled out on the ground. Dazed, they heard the front door slam, a car engine start up and speed away from the house. "That will be Horace," said Grandad. Strong winds had wreaked havoc in the cottage. Furniture was smashed and scattered around, but strangely enough the fire was still burning. Willow leaped all over Grandad, trying to lick him. He was so happy to be back in familiar surroundings. The radio was playing low in the background, and everything seemed calm. Slowly, Ben and Grandad stood up and brushed themselves down. "Are you okay, Grandad?" asked Ben. "I'm just coming around, Ben. How are you?" "I really can't believe what happened," said Ben. Grandad scratched his head and looked thoughtful, but said nothing as he put the kettle on the fire. "I need a nice cup of tea, Ben. I'll make one for both of us. That's if there are any cups left." Ben began to tidy up the cottage while Grandad made them a drink. A knock on the door broke the silence. They both looked at each other as Willow barked energetically. "Who can this be at such a late hour?" said Grandad, opening the door. To their surprise, it was Ben's mum and dad. They came in and said hello and received a big hug from Ben. "Well, that was a nice big hug, Ben. Have you missed us?" asked Mum. "You need to come into the 21st century, Dad," she continued. "You need to get a phone installed as we haven't been able to contact you all night. You should be going on coach holidays like your friends do. You never go anywhere. It's not good locking yourself away on your own up here." Grandad and Ben gave each other a wink. "If only they knew where we have been," whispered Ben to Willow. "Oh, what's wrong with Willow? He's limping. And why has he got feathers on him?" questioned Ben's dad. "He's just been doing so much running," said Ben. "Well, you need to take him to the vet for a checkup," said Ben's dad. "He's getting old now." "Look in your pocket, Grandad," said Ben. Grandad pulled out of his pocket the receipt for the vet and smiled across to Ben's dad. "It's okay, I'm best taking him to vets who've looked at his leg already. Maybe Ben would like to come with me sometime next week for a little adventure," said Grandad. "Dad," chuckled Ben's mum, "I don't think Ben would want to go to the vets." "Please don't go without me, Grandad," pleaded Ben, tugging on Grandad's jumper. "You must take me with you." Ben's mum and dad looked puzzled across the room at each other and shrugged. Ben's dad turned the radio up to hear the latest news. "There have been some strange activities going on in Liverpool. No one can explain how a lion from outside St. George's Hall is now at the Albert Dock with the remains of a bone at his side. It is very strange indeed, as the bone is also a relic belonging to Professor Martingale, who was giving a lecture at St. George's Hall when the bone was snatched by a dog. Investigations have already begun on this case. We will try to resolve these mysteries in the near future, but we don't have much hope," reported the broadcaster. Grandad leapt up and turned the radio over, only to hear the Beatles' song, "We All Live in a Yellow Submarine." "It really did happen, Grandad," Ben said. "Well, come on, we had better set off," said Dad. "There's strange things happening all over tonight, and you two are looking like you have been up to no good." "Ben, get your things together," said Ben's mum. "We're going home now." "Grandad, will you introduce me to Horace next time I come?" asked Ben. Grandad scratched his head and thought for a moment. He cleared his throat. "Ahem! I'll have to have a word with that Horace fellow next time I see him." Grandad opened the door for them. "Have a nice journey home now, and I'll see you soon, Ben." The end.